maybe in all cases, the Christians are the indigenous people of that region.
Yes.
The
Yes.
Christians were there. We call them Christians
Yeah.
because of lack of better term. Yeah,
Hmm.
if we were unified under one national term, we would use that term. But they're the original people of that region. They were there before the Arabs, before the Ottomans, before the Kurdish people. Maybe the
Yeah.
Persians were more or less the similar period of
Hmm.
time there, but all the other nations or most of the other people living there today, they came later.
Yeah.
They
And
came
more
later. So we
importantly,
are the indigenous people there,
yeah, we
and
are the
it's
indigenous
very
people.
important. To be Christian is not the only attribute
Yeah.
which distinct us from the others. We are people by we are separate people. That's it.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
our own
We're
culture,
there.
our own language, our own history,
Yeah.
um, and the rich history actually.
Yes. Oh, very rich history. Very rich
Yeah.
history. So this has been my approach for dealing with it. And whenever we meet with members of Congress in the Senate or the House of Representatives, we always give this talk you just provided about we are the indigenous Christians of the Middle East. Um, we have a history of art, culture, religion, of course. We
Yeah.
provided arts and sciences to the Middle East. We built the hospitals. We established. It's a different society completely, unrecognizable. In fact, it would be a disaster if you take Christians out of that society. It would be homogenous. Uh, Society without any diversity, and any society that has no diversity is more prone and inclined to become radical. And this is the big point for the U.S. government to understand.
It's a very good point. Let's come back to your work at IDC. Your background as a Syriac, uh, how does that influence your work at IDC? Uh,
Well, it influences my work in one way, but in another from another perspective, it should not influence my work also because
for
as
sure.
IDC, we are in defense of Christians. That is, any Christian that finds itself in danger and in threat. That's Christians, Armenian Christians, Coptic Christians, Syriac Christians, of course, including Assyrian and Chaldean Christians, Christians of all backgrounds. So but what being Syriac and having Syriac background does provide me is insight and perspective and unique understanding that most probably would not be able to understand apart from academic study. For me, it's of course I studied academically, but for me, I have a more intuitive and more organic understanding of the situation that they face themselves in today. And so I hope I can bring that richness to my work. Um, because that's really I think that's what separates me from most others in this work.
Yeah. There's a saying in English. It says, "Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Uh, Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime."
That's correct.
And why do I say this saying? Um, if IDC, for example, advocate for the Christians in the Middle East and Africa, let's say, um, in media, in policy, etc., as you mentioned before, it's I would say it's like give a man a fish to feed him for a day. Isn't it
Mhm.
the next step to say, okay, let's because this communities, Christian communities, especially in the diaspora, if they would be organized in a good manner, and very obviously they are not able to organize themselves for the last 100 years in diaspora. Maybe it would be a great idea for an organization like IDC to say, okay, let's organize them, and they will be the mutual people to advocate for the brothers and sisters in the homelands. So the IDC would generate a partner for lifetime, a very strong partner, I would say. The Syriac, let's stay at the Syriac people for now. Not that I want, I respect all the others, of course, the Copts, etc., etc. But because I think most of our audience will be Syriac, let's concentrate on the Syriac.
Yep.
If there would be an entity like IDC, for example, to organize the diaspora to be really a strong diaspora, good organized, like uh, diaspora government, let's say. If we could do something like that, and I think there were like 100 attempts in the last 100 years of just there are a lot of attempts. I hear about them, but it's very obvious. It's very difficult to do. Would that be an idea for IDC to do? Because you would create the best partner for your work.
I think you cut off there. I think
Okay,
you're back. Can you hear me?
I hear you. Can you hear
Okay,
me?
thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. You cut for a quick moment. I think that's a
Okay.
wonderful question, Andros.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's something we are in fact working on now. For a long time, we've been wanting to multiply our work, not just do the work that's required, but multiply it for years to come. As you mentioned, give a man a fish, he eats today. Give a man a fish, teach a man how to fish, and he'll eat for a lifetime. Um, in recent days, months, years, I have been working to do exactly as you've described. In fact, most recently, I've been working closely with His Eminence Archbishop John Kawak here in the United States to begin some sort of advocacy capacity for our people here in the United States. With the blessing of His Holiness Patriarch Ephraim II, we are doing just that. We're at the very early stages. We're discussing, we're planning, but it is something that we do have intentions to work on even greater as time goes on. One thing I want to point out, however, is in order to do such a thing successfully, it's essential for our people to plan ahead of time and think in the future in terms of how they educate themselves, how they see their role in American society, how they see their role in Syriac society, and then move forward from there. Because, as you mentioned, we've been in the United States now for in the diaspora for about 100 years, just over 100 years, and we basically are in the same position that we were in 100 years ago. Um, we are maybe have more money. Um, we have bigger houses, nicer cars, but that doesn't really change the situation that we're in as a people, particularly what it means for where we're headed uh, tomorrow and whether we will survive to see tomorrow or 100 years from now. In order to survive and thrive and grow in the diaspora, we need a few things. One, as we mentioned before, is to have a strong sense of identity. Leaving the name issue aside, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
it's important, but it's not urgent. But having a strong sense of identity as understanding who we are, not necessarily by name, but what our history is, what we've accomplished, who our forefathers were, what we've provided to world civilization, arts and sciences, and these things. Having confidence in who we are, because I find that our people, in often cases, not all, have like an inferiority complex. If you're familiar with this term, an
Yeah.
inferiority complex, we look at ourselves self-consciously or to be less than um, our neighbors in the United States or in the diaspora. This is a problem. We need to have more confidence in who we are, so we can say strongly, "This is who I am. I'm not Iraqi. I'm not Jordanian. I'm not Palestinian, Lebanese. This is who I am." The name, again, that's for another day. But in addition to identity, we must be intentional, right? So intentionality.
Yeah.
And what I mean by intentionality is this: for centuries, right, for at least for 1500 years, we've been the victim of history. We've been caught between empires. We've been caught between enemies. We've been caught between Arabs and Israelis, Sunni and Shia, Turk and Kurd, and we are always in the middle. So we never wrote our own history. We were just the victim of history. So now in the West, in the diaspora, in Europe and in the United States, we are now in a position to be intentional with our history, right? Not to just take life as it comes to us, not to take history as it comes to us. It's to think ahead and plan with some forethought. That's one thing. Now, the counterbalance to that is to be reflective, right? To be intentional is to look forward with intention. To be reflective is to look behind us and closely examine and think about and conduct analysis of what we've seen, what we've been through. Because for 100 years, we've been talking about Seifel, and it's very important that we continue to talk about Seifel. But now that the dust has settled and we've had a chance to breathe and take a deep breath, we need to ask ourselves the hard questions. What were the decision points? What were the mistakes? What were the victories, the successes, the failures, and what were the lessons learned going forward, right? So it's being intentional and being reflective, and I think that's important. So back to your initial point about putting together some sort of an advocacy lobby for the Syriacs in the United States and in the West. It's very doable. It's a goal. It's an important thing to really prioritize. But essential would be to have these three things: the strong sense of identity and self-confidence as a community, that confidence, and to be intentional and to be reflective. And with those three things, I have no doubt that our people will be successful, because when we look at our forefathers and all that they were able to accomplish, there's no reason to think otherwise.
Thank you very much for what you just said, and I agree totally. I always say we are always reacting, but we are not acting. We are not proactive. Yeah,
Yes.
I think that's what you mean with intentionally.
Yeah.
And we can learn not only from Seifo, which is 110 years ago already, but also from what happens right now in Syria, or what happened in the invasion of Iraq in 2003, let's say,
Yeah.
um, which, if we were prepared, sorry, I think the camera is back. Okay, now I
There you
think
are.
you can see me again. Yeah, perfect. If we were prepared in 2003, before the US went into Iraq, if we would be prepared, how would be the outcome? Much better than today. If we would be prepared for the Arab Spring in Syria, and it was foreseeable, yeah, you could
Mhm.
see this will come to Syria. And the Arab Spring started in 2008. In 2011, it started in Syria. So we had 3 years preparation time. We as a nation, but we
Yeah.
didn't use it because we are always reacting on what's happening. So if
Yeah.
we were organized, better organized, of course we are organized. It's not like we have no organizations, and it's not like they are doing nothing. They are doing a lot of things, and thanks to all of them, and huge respect to all of them. But it's very obvious it's not enough. And I'm pretty
Mhm.
sure we could do much more if we would be, if a bigger part of our people would be supporting that. So if we would be prepared for for the Arab Spring in Syria, let's say, we would have a much better outcome than today, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you mean, and we have to learn from our history and be
Yeah.
prepared, because there will always come something.
Yeah.
Let's say, for example, right now, just the in Syria in 8th December, the HTS took over, right?
Yeah.
If we are prepared, we can maybe use this situation for the good. The same
Mhm.
like in Lebanon, Hezbollah is more or less not defeated, but it's much weaker
Mhm.
than the last 30 years, because the unofficial power of Lebanon was the last 30 years was Hezbollah. They were
Yeah.
like they were like government in government. The official government could do nothing
Yeah.
without Hezbollah. So maybe right now it's a
Mm.
historical chance to change that again. Yeah.
Yeah.
But are we as our community, yeah, are we prepared? Or are we right now saying, oh, there's maybe a chance, let's do something? I think that's what you mean. Be intentional. But to be intentional,
Yeah.
I think you need a strong organization, uh,
Yeah.
which has also the means. to do, not only think strategically to the future, but also have the means to do what is necessary.
Yeah. And I think a great example you pointed out earlier in the conversation was the example of Taumim Simkat in the
Yeah.
orphanage in Adana. The organization here in the United States, New Jersey, Boston, Rhode Island, that supported the orphanage. And as you said, today, our people in Syria, our people in Iraq, they don't have the capacity to really um, to serve themselves, whether it's financially, humanitarian interests, or even politically. So they're relying on us here in the West, Europe and the United States, to stand for them, to speak for them, to provide some kind of political or financial cover for them. And so it's incumbent upon us. It's our responsibility to do so, because if we don't, who will? I mean, that's what it comes down to. Their numbers in Syria are far lower than they've ever been, even far lower than they were 10 years ago. So they're waiting for us. They're waiting for us. And I'm happy to report. I'm proud to report in recent months, and probably about a year now. In fact, over a year now, the Eastern Archdiocese of the Syriac Church. We're talking church here,
Yeah.
not a secular organization. Has put together an organization, a humanitarian organization, to help our brothers and sisters in Syria who are suffering in recent years. They've helped them financially and otherwise, and this model needs to be looked at and examined, and improved upon even, so that we can increase our capacity and increase our capability to do such things. So it's very important.
Yeah, for sure. As I said, we have a lot of organizations who are
Yep.
doing a lot of good things. Yeah, and
Yep.
it would be too much to list them right now. And
Yep.
I think I'm very thankful for all of them.
Yep.
But as I said, I think it would be great if we could organize ourselves in a much better way, or much more organized, much more
Yep.
structured, and bigger, at least bigger, as big as possible, because I would say we as individuals are very successful. I think
Hmm.
in general, wherever we are pretty successful
Yep.
individually, but as a community, we are very weak.
Yeah. I
We are
agree with
very
this. This
weak.
is,
We
yeah.
are very unsuccessful. As a
Yeah.
community, we are not successful. But on an individual level, we are very successful. And
Yeah.
we have to change that. We have to be also
Yeah.
as a community very successful, and we have to be seen. We have to have a voice, etc. And this
Yeah.
is difficult if we stay like as we are today.
Yeah. A great point you bring up there is the fact that we have individual success, but collectively, we haven't had just as much success. And before, when I was talking about being intentional and being reflective, when I say reflective, I mean a very large number of things. One of which is examining what the effect of Seifo was on us, right? When you say we're collectively as a community not as successful and effective, you must ask ourselves, we must ask ourselves, how much of that was because of this phenomenon of the psychology of persecution, or psychological homelessness, right? Because psychological homelessness is a very real thing for a stateless community, and the psychology of persecution will affect people not just immediately after that one generation after the persecution, the immediate survivors, but even children, grandchildren, great grandchildren learn the lessons of these people who were survivors and scarred by persecution. And so you have to ask yourself, how much of that contributes to our, yes, individual success, but our collective shortcoming. Um, Something that needs to be analyzed. This is part of that reflective necessity to be reflective.